The text landed just as my kettle clicked off. 3 words detonated a decade of being the good daughter. I closed my banking app and flipped 6 quiet switches. The house I'd been funding for years started to flicker. By the time the turkey was cold, my screen showed 87 missed calls and I hadn't even played my ace yet. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. My name is Jasmine, and I am a 29-year-old senior compliance officer for a fintech firm in Denver. My life is built on precision. Risk assessments, regulatory audits, the quiet hum of servers. That is my sanctuary. I live in a loft downtown that feels less like a home and more like a clean room. Everything has a place. Every liability is accounted for. Except one. For the last 5 years, I have been the invisible infrastructure holding up a family that barely acknowledges my existence. My parents, David and Angela, live in a sprawling ranch house 40 minutes away in the suburbs, a house they cannot afford, filled with furniture they didn't pay for. And then there is Hunter, my cousin. Or as my mother calls him, the visionary. Hunter is 28. He wears limited edition sneakers and talks loudly about crypto, NFTs, and the future of finance. He has never held a job for longer than 6 months. Yet at every family gathering, he is the star. He is the one with potential. I am just the one with the paycheck. Last month, I sat at my parents' kitchen table while Hunter explained his latest venture to my father. He needed seed capital for a mining rig. It's passive income, Uncle Dave, he said, leaning back in a chair I had bought. You just set it up and let it print money. My father nodded, eyes wide, captivated by the promise of easy wealth. He didn't ask where the electricity would come from. He didn't ask about the hardware costs. He just looked at Hunter like he was seeing the son he wished I was. I sat there, silent, reviewing a notification on my phone. It was a transfer confirmation. $2,800. The mortgage payment for the very roof over their heads. It had just left my account. Nobody thanked me. Nobody even looked at me. I was just part of the furniture, a utility that functioned so reliably it had become invisible. This is the trap of normalizing cruelty. It wasn't that they were actively trying to be evil. It was worse. To them, I wasn't a person with needs or feelings. I was a resource. Like running water or electricity. You don't thank the faucet for giving you water. You only notice it when it stops. You only get angry when it malfunctions. They didn't see my financial support as a gift. They saw it as the baseline, the standard operating procedure. And because I had never said no, because I had always quietly filled the deficits, I had taught them that my boundaries didn't exist. I had trained them to treat me as an appliance. But appliances break. And sometimes when the load gets too heavy, they short-circuit. I looked at the bank transfer again. $2,800. Plus the $850 power bill that had spiked mysteriously last month. Plus the investment loan of $15,000 I had given my father 2 years ago to fix the roof, a roof that still leaked. The total drain was nearing $210,000. That was the cost of my membership in this family. A subscription fee for love I never received. I stood up from the table that night and washed my own dish. Hunter was still talking, sketching diagrams on a napkin. My mother was refilling his glass. You're so smart, Hunter, she cooed. Jasmine, why can't you be more innovative like your cousin? I didn't answer. I just dried the plate, placed it in the cabinet, and walked out. That was the last time I was in their house. Until tonight. Tonight is Christmas Eve. A blizzard warning is in effect for the greater Denver area. The wind is howling against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my loft, but inside, it is perfectly still. I am alone. I have my tea, my laptop, and my silence. At 7 p.m., my phone buzzed. I expected a Merry Christmas or maybe a question about what time I'd be arriving tomorrow. Instead, I saw a text from my mother. Don't bother coming, moron. We don't have seats for killjoys. Hunter invited some investors and we need the space. Maybe next year. I stared at the screen. Moron. Killjoy. The words didn't hurt. That was the surprise. They didn't sting. They just landed like data points in a final report. A confirmation of a hypothesis I had been testing for years. I didn't cry. I didn't type out a furious response. I set the mug down on a coaster. I opened my laptop. I logged into the master dashboard of my life, the spreadsheet where I tracked every single penny. I navigated to the tab labeled Family Liabilities. Row 4, Duke Energy. Status: Autopay active. Row 5, Xfinity Gigabit Internet. Status: Autopay active. Row 6, AT&T Family Plan. Status: Autopay active. Row 7, The Mortgage. Status: Co-signed. Direct debit active. I looked at the snow swirling outside. It was 5 degrees below zero. A record low. The kind of cold that seeks out every crack in a foundation. I thought about the invisible chain of the survivor. The psychological tether that keeps the responsible one bound to the people who use them. For years, I told myself I was paying these bills because I was good, because I was strong. But that was a lie. I was paying them because I was afraid. I was afraid that if I stopped paying, the last fragile connection to my parents would snap. I believed, deep down, that my value was transactional, that I was purchasing my place at the table, that if the check bounced, their love would bounce with it. It was a financial Stockholm syndrome. I had been held hostage by my own need for validation. But tonight, looking at that text message, moron, the chain didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt brittle. It felt ready to break. They didn't want me at the table? Fine. Then they didn't get the infrastructure that paid for the table. I clicked on the Duke Energy tab. Manage Autopay. The cursor hovered over Cancel. I didn't hesitate. Click. Are you sure? The pop-up asked. Yes. Status: Cancelled. I moved to Xfinity. Click. Cancelled. I moved to AT&T. Click. Cancelled. I moved to the mortgage portal. This was the big one. The direct debit that kept the foreclosure notices at bay. Click. Revoke authorization. It took less than 3 minutes. 6 switches flipped from on to off. I sat back and watched the snow fall. 40 miles away, in a drafty ranch house, the systems were still running. The lights were on. The heater was humming. The Wi-Fi was streaming Hunter's crypto charts. They didn't know yet. They were warm and smug, laughing at the killjoy they had just excluded. But the signal had been sent. The grid was going dark. It was just a matter of time. I took a sip of tea. It was still hot. Compliance, I whispered to the empty room. Account suspended due to non-payment. I waited. 20 minutes later, the first notification appeared on my phone. A generic alert from the smart home app one managed for them. Thermostat offline. Then another. Smart lock offline. I watched the digital dashboard of their lives turn from green to red. It was fascinating. I wasn't looking at a home anymore. I was looking at a failing system. 40 miles away, the temperature in that drafty ranch house was already dropping. The servers Hunter used to mine his imaginary fortune were spinning down. The streaming services my mother used to ignore her husband were buffering into oblivion. Then a text from my father. Hey, internet just cut out. Can you fix? I didn't reply. I watched the snow pile up on the ledge of my window. 5 minutes later. Another text. Power flickering. Heater making weird noise. Jasmine. 10 minutes later. A call from my mother. I silenced it. Then a text from Hunter. Yo, fix the Wi-Fi. I'm in a trade. I smiled. It was a cold, small smile. The panic was starting. They weren't calling because they missed me. They weren't calling to apologize for the text, or to ask if I was safe in the storm. They were calling because the utility was malfunctioning. They were calling tech support. But tech support was closed for the holidays. By 8:30, my phone was lighting up every 30 seconds. Calls from Dad. Calls from Mom. Calls from Hunter. 87 missed calls in total. I scrolled through the desperate texts piling up on the lock screen. We're freezing. What did you do? Pick up the phone. This isn't funny. They assumed it was a glitch. They assumed it was a mistake. They couldn't conceive of a world where I would voluntarily stop the flow of resources. It didn't occur to them that the appliance had decided to unplug itself. To them, my compliance was a law of physics. Gravity doesn't just turn off. Jasmine doesn't just say no. I opened the smart home app one last time. System unreachable. The connection was severed. I revoked my own admin access. I deleted the app from my phone. I was no longer the administrator. I was just a bystander. I opened my credit monitoring app. I needed to make sure I had missed nothing. I needed a full forensic audit of my own exposure. If I was burning the bridge, I needed to make sure I wasn't standing on it. I pulled my full Tribureau report. I scanned the active accounts. Student loans mine. Car lease mine. The mortgage cosigner. But then Maya caught something else. A new line item. Opened 3 months ago. Helic Home Equity Line of Credit. Balance. $15,000. I frowned. I hadn't authorized a Helic. The house was in my name as a cosigner. They couldn't open a line of credit without my signature. I clicked on the details. The lender was a predatory online bank. The application date was in October. The stated purpose, home improvement. I felt a cold prickle of dread that had nothing to do with the blizzard. I navigated to the bank's portal. I verified my identity. I pulled the loan documents. There it was. My signature. Or rather, a digital approximation of my signature. And below it, a power of attorney document. I downloaded the file. I zoomed in. It was a forgery. A clumsy cut-and-paste job using a signature from an old birthday card I had sent them. And the notary stamp? It looked fake. I looked at the disbursement history. The $15,000 hadn't gone to a contractor. It hadn't gone to roof repairs. It had been transferred to a crypto exchange wallet. Hunter. The pieces slammed together. The mysterious spike in the electric bill that they had blamed on space heaters. The constant hum coming from the basement that my father claimed was the old furnace. The sudden influx of cash Hunter had been flashing around town. The visionary. He hadn't just been using my electricity to run his mining rig. He had stolen the equity in the house. My equity, my liability, to buy the machines in the first place. He hadn't just mooched. He had committed a felony. My parents had either helped him or looked the other way while he forged my name. They had sold my credit rating to fund his gambling addiction. They had leveraged my financial future because they believed Hunter's delusions over my stability. The anger that washed over me then wasn't the cold, professional detachment I had felt earlier. This was hot. This was nuclear. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a crime scene. My phone rang again. A FaceTime request. Family group. I looked at the screen. I looked at the forged document on my laptop. I accepted the call. The video connected. The image was grainy and dark. They were huddled in the living room, illuminated only by flashlights and the dying glow of a fireplace. They were bundled in coats and scarves. My mother looked furious. Hunter looked arrogant, holding his phone up like a weapon. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Hunter shouted, his breath visible in the cold air. "Do you know how much money I'm losing right now? Fix the internet. You cut the power?" My mother screamed. "Are you insane? It's Christmas Eve." My father was in the background, shivering. "Jasmine, please. Whatever this is, just turn it back on. We're freezing." I didn't say a word. I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I simply clicked share screen. The image on their phones changed. They weren't looking at my face anymore. They were looking at my desktop. I opened Binder 1. The spreadsheet of every bill I had paid for 5 years. $210,000. "This is the ledger," I said. My voice was calm, amplified by the speakers on their phones. "This is what it costs to be your daughter." Silence. They stared at the numbers. "You think you're clever?" Hunter sneered. "So you paid some bills. Big deal. You owe them. They raised you." "I don't owe you a felony," I said. I opened Binder 2. The PDF of the forged power of attorney. The transfer receipt to the crypto wallet. The IP address logs showing the loan application came from the house. "This is a Helic application," I said. "Dated October 14th. Signed by me." Except I didn't sign it. The silence in the living room shifted. It went from angry to terrified. Even through the grainy video, I saw the blood drain from my mother's face. Hunter lowered his phone slightly. That's a misunderstanding," my father stammered. "We were going to pay it back. It was an investment." Hunter said. Hunter committed identity theft, I interrupted. And bank fraud. And wire fraud. And you let him. It's not a big deal. Hunter yelled, his voice cracking. I'm going to triple it next month. I was doing you a favor. I have the police report pre-filled, I said. I pulled up the browser window. The form was completed. The evidence was attached. My mouse hovered over the submit button. I have two choices tonight, I told them. Option A, I file this report against Hunter for identity theft. He goes to jail. You lose the house because the fraud voids the mortgage terms. Jasmine, no. My mother wailed. Option B, I continued. You admit it. Right now. You admit you stole from me. You admit you value his get-rich-quick schemes over my actual livelihood. And then I file the report against all three of you for conspiracy. You wouldn't, Hunter hissed. I canceled the heat in a blizzard, I said. Try me. My father started to cry. We're sorry. We're sorry. Don't send him to jail. Please. It's not up to me anymore, I said. It's up to the compliance department. I clicked submit. On their screen, a progress bar loaded. Report successfully filed. Whatever happens next, I said, is just the audit process running its course. I ended the call. The screen went black. I sat in the silence of my loft. The wind was still howling outside, but inside, it was warm. I checked the utility status one last time. Service disconnected. The house, their house, my burden was dark. In the days that followed, the collapse was total. The police investigation was swift. The digital trail Hunter left was clumsy and obvious. He was arrested 2 days after Christmas. The charges were severe. My parents tried to leverage their status in the community, but without my money flowing into their accounts, their facade crumbled instantly. The bank called the Helic due immediately upon discovering the fraud. They couldn't pay. They were forced to sell the ranch house at a loss to cover the debts and the legal fees for Hunter's defense. They moved into a small rented apartment across town. The friends they had impressed with their wealth disappeared the moment the truth came out. This is the illusion of power of the empty wallet. They had walked around with their heads high, believing they were successful, believing they were entitled to look down on me. But their entire lifestyle was leased. It was rented on my credit. They had no equity in their own lives. Once the subsidy ended, their true market value was revealed. It was zero. You cannot disrespect the hand that feeds you and expect to stay full. They learned that lesson in the cold and the dark. I sit here now a week into the new year. My apartment is clean. The kettle is boiling. I open my laptop. I open the master spreadsheet. I find the tab labeled Family Liabilities. I right-click. Delete. Are you sure you want to permanently delete this sheet? Yes. The rows of debt vanish. The columns of obligation disappear. The red numbers turn into a blank, white canvas. I am alone. I have no parents to call on Sundays. I have no cousin to envy, but I am solvent. I am secure. And for the first time in my life, I am free. I close the laptop. I pour the tea. I watch the steam rise against the glass, blurring the city lights. It is a quiet life, and it is entirely mine. If you've ever had to audit your own life to find your freedom, share the story. Hit that like button if you believe that sometimes the only way to win is to close the account.